Palms down. All right, good evening, everybody. Nice to see you all. Thank you for showing up. Anyone here for the first time this evening? Those of you here for the first time, welcome. What brings you here?
Meditation.
Meditation. That's it. Yeah. How's it going for you so far?
We have our days.
Yeah. Nice. Well, welcome. Glad you're here.
Thank you.
My friend invited me, and then also just looking to try out new things.
Yeah. So many other better new things than this, but you're already here, so you might as well go through it. You know? Yeah. What else? First time? Yeah.
My friend invited me,
Yeah.
and I am also looking to learn how to meditate better, calm my mind.
And you think that's ever going to happen?
Not to the degree that I probably would benefit from, maybe.
Good. See, so it's better already. I mean, you completely dropped your expectations to zero, and you're good to go. You know? Anyone else here calmed their mind? Just a quick look around, show of hands. Yeah. It's a funny thing because we want to calm the mind, but it's really the practice is calming the mind when you're not doing what you would refer to as meditation. And then therefore the desire, need, and craving to meditate, to so-called calm the mind, just falls away because you've taken care of everything you're doing outside of meditation. You know, there's a line I say at the end of almost every meditation practice, not always, so I'll say it now just to make sure I say it. But there's this idea, where the line I always say is, if your life is a crazy, hectic, stressed out mess, meditation doesn't fix that. Meditation helps you become aware of your life that's a crazy, hectic, stressed out mess, so you can then make changes in your life. And meditation is actually an opportunity not even to get calm. The practice of meditation isn't about being calm. It's the biggest misconception in Western culture on meditation, that we think, okay, I'm going to meditate so I can be calm. You're actually, the practice of meditation is to just be aware of what you are. Phones ring, people cough. This is life, right? I always love when phones ring during meditation, especially because it's like that instant state of panic from the person whose phone it was, right? They're like just mortified. And then they're like, everybody else is wondering who was it. And they start thinking like, did I turn my phone off? And then there's a sense of panic of like, oh no, what if it goes again? The other day, somebody's phone rang and it was great. Their phone rang and then they moved it to like vibrate mode. And then like 30 seconds later, you could still hear the whole vibrating mode. So you might as well have just left it on ring. But like, that's meditation. Meditation isn't calm. Meditation isn't peace. Meditation isn't any of those words that our culture has tied to meditation. It's awareness of present moment. And the word meditation literally comes from the word Zen. Chan in Chinese, Zen in Japanese comes from the word jhana, which is knowledge or gnosis. So it's literally just awareness of present moment. And if your mind is a mess, then learn to be aware of your mind that is a mess. Don't be so concerned with making it calm, because then you're just fighting that mess of a mind. So then your mind is a mess, and you sit down to do a meditation practice thinking, okay, I need to be calm. And now you've just created this internal conflict that says, I'm a mess and I want to be calm. And then the two minds at that moment are just fighting each other. Now you're a mess, trying to be calm, and you're in a fight. No good. Right? So the practice, again, is just to be with whatever you're with. And if we can learn to be with whatever we're with, that by default will create a sense of calmness. But instead of using the word calm, it's really creating a sense of acceptance and embracing present moment. And if we can embrace present moment and accept present moment and be with present moment, then calmness arises. So, yeah. So we'll start with meditation practice just so you can all get calm. Those who are joining virtually, thanks for showing up. Glad you're here. Feel free to say hello as you are. The chat box somewhere on your screen. A couple things to tell you before we begin. Nothing's going to happen to you. You're not going to float away. You're not going to have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice. You need to ask yourself, is this working or not working? Are you doing it right or wrong? We're just going to sit and we're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds inside, sounds outside. This is life. Life is filled with chaos, and this practice is learning to get quiet and still within all of the chaos. Posture, you just want to be comfortable. If you're on a cushion, often it helps slide into the front third, pushing the stomach forward. Allows the back to straighten, shoulders are relaxed. If you're on a bench or chair, however you're seated, same thing. Just trying to sit up straight, relaxing the shoulders, hands on the knees or lap. I'll guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. Most important with this practice, do not expect anything. We're just going to sit and breathe. Starting with the eyes closed if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually, settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus, to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath. As the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. Breathing in, follow breath in. Breathing out, follow breath out. Letting go of expectations, letting go of judgments from the practice. Just sitting, breathing. body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle, know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do, nowhere else to go, and no one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. Once again, taking 3 deep breaths slowly. As you slowly open the eyes, slowly beginning to move. And most important, the practice of meditation is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, it's nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how you sit and hold the hands or cross the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It's everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samutpata, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being, no different than any one of us, who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. And what that means very simply for all of us, regardless of where you come from or what you believe in or where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens. More reactions, that's it. That's what we get. This practice is simply learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way you responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond to every other 20-minute period of your day. So all we're working on is closing the gap where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. It's not an easy practice. It's not necessarily fun. It's not an escape, as often people think it is. It is direct perception into the present moment. And as I was speaking about earlier, the present moment is filled with conflict, chaos, difficulties, challenges. And this practice of learning to be with life as it arises, not running from it, which is what most people spend their life doing. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. It's just sitting, breathing, and becoming aware of what you think and what you say and what you do. That's all. Once we stop trying to change, fix, control, manipulate everything and everyone around us, and we work on changing our mind and our reaction to the world around us, life gets simpler. But it is a practice. These emotions, they come and go. They are impermanent, as the Buddha taught. But they're caused by what we think, what we say, and what we do. And too often as these emotions arise, we just cling to them and we think that we're stuck with them. I'm sad, I'm angry, I'm depressed, I'm happy, I'm joyful, I'm whatever it is. Emotions are they're like clouds. They're just passing by. And so too often people jump to the emotions and they just think that that's what's real, without looking at what's causing them. And what's causing them is our thoughts and our words and our actions. This is what the Buddha taught very simply is the root cause of all suffering. Understanding our thoughts and our words and our actions, and whether they're filled with greed, anger, and ignorance, or with generosity, compassion, and wisdom. This practice is about helping you be at peace and suffer less. It's for you. That then benefits those around you. But this practice isn't about how do I fix the world, how do I change the world, how do I solve the problems in the world. This practice is about recognizing your suffering. And as the Buddha taught, you are suffering only because of your thoughts, your words, and your actions. Your greed, your anger, your ignorance. And we often want to point fingers and blame everybody else for all of our misery, but focus on, if you're suffering, understand your greed, and practice giving. Give people time, give people attention, give people a smile, give people a hug, whatever. Just give. And you'll feel better. If you're angry, focus on compassion towards yourself and those around you. And if you're ignorant, meaning you're lost in your reality or your perception of reality, practice wisdom, which for me is always just stop doing so much stupid stuff that's harming you and everybody else. This practice is not complicated. You can spend your whole life blaming everybody else for everything that's wrong with you. That gets you nowhere. It gets expensive. A lot of therapy sessions, you know? This practice is super simple. Generosity, compassion, and wisdom. That is it. That's what the Buddha taught for 45 years before he died. And as they say, he taught it 84,000 different ways, which just means there's many different paths to figuring out how to do that. But it's really the same thing. That's why so many of the sutras the Buddha's teaching are so repetitive. Because it's just trying to say the same thing over and over and over again until we finally realize how simple it is. So, with that, I'll pause. As always, I just prefer to respond to questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with. And again, to those who are joining virtually, welcome. Glad you're here. Feel free to say hello as you are. If you have any questions, put them on the chat box. I'll do my best to respond. So we'll open up to questions.
I have a question about like the orange and orange. Does that mean anything? Why is there like a predominance of orange in the Buddhist thing?
Just a color. Just colors. Different cultures of Buddhism, different schools of Buddhism, different lineages of Buddhism have different colors. They don't necessarily mean anything. Yeah. A lot of sutras talk about golden rays of sunshine emanating from the Buddha's head, from his body. They're kind of metaphors. It's not like the Buddha was literally sitting there with golden rays of sunshine shining out of him, but the idea is just to recognize the Buddha nature that's within all of us. But they're just colors. Yeah.
You talk about one of the things is to practice like wisdom. And how does that resonate? I've been here a little bit, and one of the things I remember is the idea of creating space for other people's truths and experiences, and that I'm just coming from my perspective. But if there is wisdom, wouldn't that mean that there is a final truth? No? Okay.
Wisdom isn't right versus wrong. We are very conditioned to think that wisdom means right versus wrong. It's not wisdom. Because right versus wrong in and of itself is a construct based on an opinion. And whose opinion do we think is always right? Yours. So therefore you would assume, based on your questioning, and I get where you're coming from, I mean, it's what's, but one would assume, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but one would assume, based on the way you ask that question, that if you're correct, if you think your view is correct, then you think that's ultimate wisdom. And therefore other people should adapt your views so they too can have wisdom. Because you think they're wrong.
Right. But what if it's based in
No, that doesn't, okay. No, you're justifying your shit.
Okay. This might be
I get it. I mean, I'm sorry, I shouldn't cut you off. I'll let you go, but I know where you're going. Go ahead. What if it's what?
It's based in compassion and kindness and love.
So then practice it, but you don't need to call that, you don't need to label that right. Because all you're doing, I get it, 1,000%, all you're doing is you're creating a condition in your head to view others as wrong.
Right, and me as right.
And you as right. Well, this is compassionate and kind, so I'm right, and that's wise. You're all not compassionate and not kind, and you're wrong, and you're ignorant. All labels. They don't think they're wrong. They don't think they're ignorant. They think they are practicing compassion. Just because you don't agree with it. Thich Nhat Hanh, the great Zen Buddhist master, priest, poet, activist, walked alongside Martin Luther King. As you've heard me say, I'm sure, he says freedom from suffering is freedom from views. Meaning, to me, what that means is, when I first heard that, one, I had a view of whether I liked that or not. So I began to form an opinion of that view, which just said all views, and then he goes on to say all views are wrong. And what that means to me in practice, right? I'm not pretending to have the mind of a Thich Nhat Hanh, but what that teaching said to me is my views are not going away. Many of my views are very strong in what I believe in and what I fight for, what I think is right and just. But all views are wrong. To me, what that says is, if I'm not creating space for anybody else to have a view, all I'm doing is immediately judging them, and then I'm justifying my view as in compassion, so you're wrong. And then you dislike them, and you hate them, and you don't want to talk to them, and you slander them, and you gossip about them, and you're angry about them all day long. Do you know how angry people are right now? It's just shit in their head all day long. Angry people they don't even know. And you know who's suffering? You. They're fine. They're destroying you. And when you're suffering and you're miserable, you know who has to deal with you? Your friends, your loved ones, your family, all these people around you. People are renting too much time in your head. Yes, practice compassion. Yes, practice loving kindness. Yes, practice understanding. Yes, practice all these wonderful things. But don't practice it as a way to justify you being right. That makes sense? Mm-hmm. Just practice compassion. Other people will practice what they're going to practice, and they're going to believe what they're going to believe. The Buddha, to me, and I've talked about this a lot recently, but the guy spent 45 years passionately, aggressively walking around trying to teach people kindness. He wasn't just sitting under a tree ignoring things. He spent his entire, well, not his entire life, but 45 years of his life devoted to teaching people loving kindness and compassion. And he did it without having anger or hatred towards other people. His cousin tried to kill him. And he loved his cousin, forgave his cousin, and taught his cousin to have compassion. He didn't sit all over Facebook judging him and telling everybody how stupid he is. So that's the practice. But if we're stuck in this world of thinking we're right and other people are wrong, you are the one who's going to be angry. This isn't about whether you are. I want to be very clear here. I'm not saying that you're not right or that you're wrong. This is not about one side or one view or one people being right or wrong. This practice is about, are you suffering? Not are other people suffering, but are you suffering? And if you're suffering because you're angry. You're suffering because you're greedy. You're craving, you're desiring things to be different. And you're suffering because you're ignorant, meaning you're ignoring reality and you're lost in your perception of what you think is right. Those are the three reasons, according to Buddhist teachings, that why you are suffering. Most people don't want to look at that right now. They just want to point fingers and blame other people. So, what else? Yeah.
So maybe not along the same line, but so the Eightfold Path is supposed to help us move forward, and the very first ones are right view and right thought. How do you apply that to?
Sure. So the problem with all of these things, coming back to, well, let me repeat that question for those virtually maybe didn't hear it. So your question was referencing the Eightfold Path, and if the Eightfold Path is supposed to help us along this, way, that they start with right view and right thought. And to put it into context, and I'll come back to this, folks who don't know, the Four Noble Truths, the very first Buddhist teaching, he said life is filled with dukkha, suffering. Doesn't mean all of life sucks, doesn't mean everything in life is traumatic or death or loss. There's also discomfort, angst, dissatisfaction, little things throughout your day. Your latte wasn't made the right way, you didn't like the way your car was cleaned, it's got a scratch on it, your sandwich wasn't made properly. This is also suffering. Not the end of the world, but if you actually are honest with yourself, that little shit throughout your day usually makes you more miserable than all the other things going on in the world, right? All the other things are going on in the world, but you're upset because somebody didn't slice your burger the same way, you wanted it, or whatever it is. So these things occur all day long. The second thing he says is the cause of suffering. This is the greed, the anger, the ignorance, as I just talked about. And we practice generosity, compassion, and wisdom to overcome that. The third is the ending of suffering, nirvana, liberation. This is where Thich Nhat Hanh says nirvana, liberation, is freedom. Freedom from suffering is freedom from views. And the fourth is the Eightfold Path. And this is to your question. And the 8 steps are having the right, and I'll come back to the part in a minute, views, thoughts, speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, concentration. This, in essence, is addressing your karma. Now, what I was starting to say is that the challenge is when we use language to kind of describe these things. Often with the Eightfold Path, it uses right view or correct view. And as soon as we use those words, as soon as we use the word right, it's giving rise to what? Wrong. As soon as we use the word correct, it's giving rise to incorrect. The terms right view or correct view are not about discounting other people's ways of doing things. I want to point that out very clearly right now. So, looking at, let me give you an example. Let's take right view with the first two, right? You ever been to Poway? You know where Poway is, right? Okay. So if you're on the 15 freeway and you're in Poway and you decide you want to go to Mexico and you get on the 15 freeway and you start going north, you ever going to get to Mexico? No. No. Yeah, I mean, I guess. Okay, fine. I've used that example a million times. Nobody's ever really come back like, trying to defend, and then if they go all the way around, they would get to Mexico, but I can't really argue with that. So fine. However that would work. But, for the most part, for the sake of this, if you're going 15 north, you're not getting to Mexico, right? So that would not be the right view. That would not be the correct view. It'll get you somewhere. And where you end up is maybe better than where you wanted to go to begin with, right? You don't know. But the idea is, for me, when I look at right and correct, is it beneficial to self in a non-selfish way and others, or is it harmful to self and harmful to others? Is the view that I'm having of the world and of myself and of others filled with anger and hatred and ignorance and greed, or is it filled with loving kindness and compassion? Not about being right or wrong or good or bad, but is my view of the world around me wrapped up in a place of loving kindness and compassion or not? And is the view that I'm taking working towards decreasing suffering in my life and the life of those around me? So that's, to me, the view, right? But it doesn't make it right. It doesn't make it correct. But if one wants to suffer less, this is a path to doing so. So it would be the correct path, the right path, one of 84,000, to suffer less. Okay? I'm pretty sure if we all followed the words of Jesus Christ, and this is coming from a Jewish kid who became a Buddhist, if we all followed the words of Jesus, we would all suffer less. I'm pretty sure. So it's not about the Buddhist. I said this many months ago. I was talking about Buddhist arrogance, where people get all into Buddhism. They're like, oh, Buddhism's great, thinking it's better than some other thing. It's just a way. So then you get into the second one, thoughts. And the thoughts, the speech, and the action, number 2, 3, and 4, is in essence specifically our karma. What we think, what we say, and what we do. So thoughts, again, same thing kind of to my first example of you, is are the thoughts we're having, are they gentle? Are they kind? Or are they filled with the opposite of that? So it's not about them being right or wrong. It's just the awareness of what's the intention behind these thoughts and then these words and then these actions. Does that make sense?
So you might substitute maybe skillful instead.
You could throw, exactly. Again, a lot of the words, it's just like life is dukkha. So 99 out of 100 Buddhist books that you read in English, they're going to translate dukkha to what? Suffering. How miserable does that sound? Life is suffering. I mean, who would want to learn about that teaching? But it's not just suffering. It's understanding suffering is the little stuff, like I mentioned. So skillful, yes. So we should change all the translations from right and correct to skillful. Interestingly enough about the Eightfold Path is that very often people come into this stuff wanting to meditate, as I talked about earlier, and just kind of fix things. But on the Eightfold Path, you use thought, speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, and concentration is where? Mindfulness and concentration.
Meditation.
Right, but where on the list? Last, 7 and 8. You know what's way before 7 and 8? What you think, what you say, and what you do. Morality and ethics. The old Buddha for you, we had a sign on the window that said free meditation. We get so many people showing up to these classes. If the sign said free morality class, how many people you think are going to show up? Nobody wants to live the moral, ethical life. They just want to do harmful stuff and then meditate and make all their pain and suffering go away like it's a bubble bath, So this is the harsh. Again, this comes back to reality. This is about the mirror looking back at yourself and saying, what are my thoughts, what are my words, what are my actions, and how am I causing suffering in myself and in those around me? There's a question here. Do you have 1 to 2 book recommendations for Thich Nhat Hanh? I think I couldn't even narrow it down to 2, but I could give you Old Path, White Cloud, Old Path. Old Path, White Cloud, I believe it is a wonderful one. Being Peace is a wonderful one. Thich Nhat Hanh's translation of the Heart Sutra, I think it's called Heart of Understanding, is a wonderful one. Any of his books, you could literally just close your eyes and pick any one. And again, to me, the beauty of Thich Nhat Hanh, it's like 84,000 paths. He's saying the same thing 84,000 ways. And but yeah, Path, White Cloud, Being Peace, and the Heart of Understanding. ask me tomorrow, I'd give you probably 3 different ones. What else? Questions?
I have a question. Thich Nhat Hanh has this quote. It's like about war, and it says, when 2 sides are fighting, a lot of times there's pressure to choose a side. And then he has this quote where he says that there is also a need to preserve peace for when the war is over. So I don't know if it's really a question, but I was just curious.
What's his quote is what there's about preserving peace when the war is over?
Yeah, like that's also a responsibility.
Yeah.
For people who don't have, like people who live in that situation. They have to also preserve peace while also participating in the war. Or being victims of the war.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got, many friends. I started probably about 15 years ago taking meditation and Buddhist practice into military environments, MCRD, boot camp, young recruits, 18 years old, fresh out, leading a Buddhist class every Sunday. Combat vets, active military, wounded warriors coming back with PTSD, traumatic brain injuries, things like that. So I learned a lot from them. And a dear friend of mine, Smitty, she's a veteran, was a Navy pilot, and many combat tours. And she said to me years ago when I first started working with this population, she said, Jeff, most people don't join the military because they want to kill people. They join the military because they want peace. And that's very important to them. And I think that the actions people take are up to each individual to choose what actions they do take. And often creating a peaceful world means that people will get harmed. That's just the reality. But I think that the ultimate practice is to figure out how do we create peace, without, or at least minimizing harm. Not that I would ever disagree with Thich Nhat Hanh anyways, but I was going to say, I agree with, that idea that, we want peace. And, if we take it out of kind of this kind of global idea of war, just think about anyone you've been in an argument with recently. Very often the people we argue with, the ones that linger with us, are those we know and love. Right? The stranger you argue with, you're probably not thinking about that anymore, but the family member, friend that you argued with 30 years ago is still destroying you, And so I think if we look at conflict, beyond this idea of like global wars, but think of war as just a fight you're having with a friend or family, a loved one. It's a battle. It's a fight. And people get harmed in those fights. Physically, mentally, emotionally. And at the end of that, very often what both sides want ultimately is peace. Whatever that means is whatever that means. Maybe it's peace together, maybe it's peace apart, who knows, but most people fight and argue because they want peace. And they're not at peace. But yeah, I've always had tremendous respect for the military population and those who sacrifice, themselves. So, on a level that you can't really comprehend unless you go through it. Yeah. What else?
One thing I've been sorry.
No, you're good. Yeah.
So my state of self. Like I feel like I've been cycling through a lot of like really good moments and then really bad or emotionally intense moments. And I thought, and maybe that's where the problem is, I thought that being more like these things will pass would bring comfort, but I find the whiplash of it to be really unsettling. And
Yeah.
I don't know, I guess I'm wondering, like, is it then like a detachment or like how to cope with that like impermanence and craving of stability?
Sure. Yeah, so the best way to crave stability is to crave instability, because that's the most stable thing that there is. There's a couple things, I'll come back to your question, but beautiful teaching from Chogyam Trungpa, who's a Tibetan Buddhist teacher, and he would say Buddhist practice is like being on a very tall building and you've jumped, and the bad news is you're falling, but the good news is there's no ground to fall on, and so you're just constantly falling and experiencing. And I think, and I love how you kind of even not corrected yourself, but you changed your words a little bit at the beginning of your question around good or bad with the emotions. And I think as a very first step, I'll just highlight this. I think it's important for us as just unenlightened humans to not look at these emotions as good or bad. They're experiences, and sometimes they're happy and joyful ones, as you're saying, and sometimes they're really just painful, sad, angry, depressing ones. And so the first part of what I'm saying is really just repeating what you said, but maybe in kind of different context, and also to put it in kind of some framework for people who are new to Buddhism, is to understand the impermanence of those emotions, as you're talking about. That really is the practice. Just like clouds, as I mentioned earlier, flying by, our emotions will come and go. Our thoughts will come and go. And this is the nature of life. The nature of life is our mind wandering through all these experiences, which then triggers emotions. And so the practice is to become the observer, and this is where you said detach. For me, I would always suggest using the word non-attachment, but the practice is to not attach to these thoughts or these emotions. They're constantly going to change, coming back to your question about impermanence. Always changing. Now, the part about the whiplash piece, which it kind of plays into an example I always give where, for me, life early on was always about like kind of this roller coaster ride where, the real high, you're just kind of, you're going up and everything's great. And you're like excited as you're riding the roller coaster up, and then boom, everything just crashes down and you're like screaming and terrified, and the person next to you like just threw up or whatever it is. So life for us very often is this high and low, this roller coaster ride, the chasing of something, the running from something, this fear of something, this excitement of thing. We're constantly chasing or running from. And for me, Buddhist practice, using that same example, is like the kiddie ride at Disneyland. It's not the real high and then crashing down roller coaster. It's the one that goes in a flat circle at about like a half a mile an hour. It's not fun. It's not exciting. I mean, it probably is for the 3-year-old, but nobody gets hurt on it, right? Although I'm sure somebody somewhere along the way jumped off and got hurt. But for the most part, Buddhist practice is like finding that kiddie ride. And what that does is the whiplash you talk about, which is a great way to put it, it takes the whiplash away. But because the mind is so torn, in the Buddhist teachings, they call the 4 Brahma Viharas: loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. And really what you're seeking and craving and desiring, which is a beautiful, as the Buddha taught, there are healthy cravings and healthy desires. Really what I'm hearing you ask and what you're craving is equanimity, which is to be able to become the observer of all these things that are happening, all these thoughts, all these emotions, and not allow them to take you on that super high or super crashing down roller coaster. To watch what's going on in the world, to watch what's going on in your communities, to watch what's going on in family and friends. Not ignore it, not pretend it doesn't exist, and not fight like hell to create change. Absolutely. But to do it without creating such internal turmoil and chaos. Because that's what I see in most people right now. Most people are just like miserable. And that will do nobody any good. The teachings of Thich Nhat Hanh, Martin Luther King, Gandhi, all those things, is to have love regardless. And to fight for what you believe in, but with love and compassion in your heart. Not with anger and hatred. And if you can do that, again, all these things are so much easier said than done, but this is the practice to my understanding. If you can do that, then the kind of extremes aren't so extreme, therefore the whiplash doesn't exist. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And believe me, nothing I'm saying do I think is like, oh yeah, this is how you do it, it's a piece of cake, you'll be there by Wednesday. No. This is a lifelong practice, because whatever's going on in your life and in the world around you today, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, it's going to be just as crazy. You know? Things don't get simpler just because we get older. You just get better at managing the craziness to where it's no longer craziness. It's just what's going on, but it doesn't destroy you. Coming back to the word of equanimity, the 4 Brahma Viharas, loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity, the practice is the practice of equanimity, to not allow ourselves to be just so swayed one way or the other. And most people are failing miserably at that right now. And that's why you're a mess. And it's just the truth, as I see it, in my unenlightened, ignorant opinion. You know? So, we'll do one more before we close. Did that address at all what you're... Yeah. Don't give up hope. So one more question before we close. If you want. Yeah.
I've asked a similar thing the last several weeks.
Yeah.
Understanding that, I want to be as you just described, I want to be the observer of my emotions and not necessarily react to my emotions, but also not have feeling like I don't have the confidence that whatever action I end up choosing to take to set my life on whatever course I want is whatever is going to work out for me.
Yeah.
And having fear of consequences of my actions.
Yeah.
Much more so than I used to, I think.
Yeah. And that's where early on this practice, I often say, you probably heard me say it, but early on with Buddhist practice, it doesn't make your life easier necessarily. That kind of ignorance is bliss type of thing, where when you start to become aware of how impactful your decisions actually are on you and those around you, you become kind of hyper aware of that. You're like, wow, I really need to be careful of what I think and say and do, because I can really harm people. When you start to pay attention to that, that's hard. For me, it was a lot easier to not really give a shit about anyone or anything. Make any decision I wanted because nobody else mattered. That was so simple. But to your one thing that stuck out this time, as you asked that or shared that, really, is that to try to abandon the idea of the decisions you're making being right. You're going to make decisions. It's the old choose your own adventure books. You're going to make a decision, and it's going to have a result, law of cause and effect. But how you attach to that result as being right or wrong or good or bad, that's kind of the what we want to not attach to is, did I make the right decision? You made a decision, and every moment we're making decisions. And hopefully, as we continue to practice, the decisions we make, again, are coming from a greater sense of loving kindness and compassion, and less of a sense of greed and anger. Yeah. All right, so we'll join palms as we close. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May all beings be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to those who need it most. before you all head out, our Dharma Bum host, Anna, has a few announcements. And as Anna's coming up, we are also looking for 1 to 2 new hosts for Wednesday night. So if you want to have the power of knowing how to break into the temple at 6:30 p.m. and close it by 8:30 p.m. and read so eloquently as Anna's about to do this thing once to twice a month on a Wednesday night, we really need help. And we're also looking for a new Thursday noontime person who also wants to gain the power of opening up the temple and hit a bell from 12 to 1 on Thursday. So if you're up for those tasks, we could really use some help. Thanks, Anna. Sorry.
You're welcome. Hello, everyone. My name is Anna. I'm tonight's host. We opened the Dharma Bum Temple 18 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those who show up. Those who lead are not nuns, monks, gurus, masters, or teachers, and are not looking for students. They are simply practitioners sharing their interpretation of the practice. Every night we have different classes led by different people from various Buddhist traditions. We have a recovery sangha that meets several times a week for anyone with addiction problems, and our food redistribution program meets every Thursday at 4:30 p.m. We have classes and programs every day, and everything we offer here is always free. The full schedule is on our website and posted in the entryway above the shoe rack. We have a lending library. If you see a book you like, feel free to borrow it, then bring it back whenever you are done with it. Please straighten your seat or cushion before you head out. I think the windows are all already closed, but if any are open, if some of you all could help close them, that would be helpful. Thank you for being here. We wish you well and hope to see you all again. Thank you.
Thanks, Anna.